Code Lyoko was a pretty strange show, yet is one of the most innovative cartoons I can think of from the early 2000s. Implementing a 2D school life where the kids fight monsters in a 3D digital world is such a cool combination of styles, especially at a time where the amount of CGI cartoons regularly airing on the big three animation networks could probably be counted on like one hand, and most of those were reusing assets from the CGI movies that did well at the box office, like Jimmy Neutron, which I personally think was way better as a show than a movie. And if you've ever seen anything ever about Code Lyoko, the first thing that might come to your mind is that show with the ridiculous foreheads. Like, you've seen people play tic-tac-toe on people's foreheads? Nah, I'm playing Connect 4 on this. Why stop there? Let's play some Battleship. Left eyebrow 4, that's a hit. Now, if the foreheads wasn't your first thought, your mind probably went to the theme song, and honestly, top 10 cartoon theme song of all time. This week alone, I've been called crazy for this take, I've had friends agree with me, and I feel like I've even convinced others that this theme song is fire emoji. I looked up videos of the singer of the Code Lyoko theme song, Noam Kaniel, and he had a pretty interesting history as a child singer, who has a lot of international songs and albums, touring in Japan as a kid and recording the theme song to the first anime aired in France. You may hear shows like Code Lyoko and Totally Spies referred to as French anime because of their Japanese-influenced art styles, animation, and even stories, so knowing that this iconic theme song is sung by someone who has both French and Japanese music experience is pretty cool. But I have to mention this one video of him singing that me and my friends came across because, oh my gosh, the filter put on this video is one of the scariest things I've ever seen. And seeing him sing from a side view is so hilarious. He looks like a serpent unhinging his jaw while he sings. How did they make this filter? So in this video, I'm going to talk about the first season of Code Lyoko because it's one of the most fascinating cartoons I've ever seen, where sometimes the vibes are just so chill and realistic, and other times they fight a computer virus that can just turn off gravity. This video is gonna be a mess. Let's just get into the first episode. Now, I'm really not a big fan of the first episode of Code Lyoko. I think it's a little bit of a mess, but I think it's such an interesting way to start the series because it just throws you into the plot of this world with little context and backstory, which I really respect. This episode starts with a couple girls filming for the school journalism club in preparation for the upcoming school dance, and we see this snooty girl named Sissy make fun of the girls, telling them to go play with their dolls because they're a couple years younger and stuff, and won't have dates. We see one of the girls desperately ask out Ulrich, one of our main characters, and he reluctantly tells them he's already going to the dance with Yumi, this strong, reserved girl who we'll see as his friend he seems to be in and out of romance with throughout the show. We're introduced to the Lyoko world pretty quickly as we see this boy Jeremy on the computer talking to this pink-haired 3D girl named Aelita. The world she's in is so barren and empty, and while I've heard the staff of Code Lyoko say if they could change anything about the show, they wish they could have invested more in the 3D aspects of the show, I don't think the 3D world here looks like this is out of budget constraints, but the 3D world feels so cold and empty in all the right ways. All we really know at this point is that Jeremy is working to bring this girl Aelita back to the real world, which ironically would change his waifu from 3D to 2D, and we know there's some kind of antagonist named Xana who is trying to harm Aelita for some reason. Later we see the girl Millie crying about how she was made fun of for being a little kid and how her work for the school paper isn't respected, as we see the computer watch her frustration with this eye-like symbol seeming to watch over her. Later, we see this dark spirit, which we learn is also part of the antagonist Xana, release out of the light fixture and take over the teddy bear. This teddy bear is actually said to be a reference to the teddy bear from the movie Akira, which is pretty interesting since the creators of Code Lyoko mentioned several anime influences, such as Serial Experiment Lane and Neon Genesis. And funnily enough, the show's co-creator Matt Romaine said he never saw Tron before creating Code Lyoko, but The Matrix was a big influence, which makes a lot of sense when you really think about how this show plays out and the parallel dimensions of the real world and the digital world and stuff. Everything in Sissy's room just randomly falls over while she's doing her skincare routine, and she's really shaken up and crying about it. It's suspected this is also a result of the mysterious Xana villain, and the school journalist girls take pictures of Sissy's ravaged dorm, learning that Tamiya's teddy bear was stolen and is in this room. Odd goes into her room to get the teddy bear back for the girls, but it's mysteriously gone. Cut to the physical education teacher named Jim, get it, like gym teacher, confronting a giant teddy bear shaped shadow and claiming he's a black belt, only for us to cut to Jim laying in a bed in the infirmary memory with this crude drawing of his attacker, which just so happens to look like a teddy bear. Odd, the blonde guy with the dyed purple diamond in his hair, yes, his name is Odd, goes into the digital Lyoko world to help fight Xana by getting Aelita to this big digital tower, which we learn is the key to stopping Xana's attacks every episode. We see Jeremy and Odd run through the sewers, hopping on their skateboards and scooters to get to their secret lab to enter the digital world, and this scene always stuck out to me growing up just because it always looked so cool. Like, I want to skateboard through the sewers, that looks fun. Also, I love Jeremy's little spinny chair. The chair spinning around this whole spherical screen looks a little extra, but also looks like it'd be really cool to sit in. You may notice Odd looks a little different in the digital world, like he's just randomly a cat boy now with sausage fingers and purple face paint, but I genuinely love how they fight in the digital world. The stakes feel so dire because they struggle to kill enemies, even these funny little creepy crawlies that look like the pod infectors from Halo's Flood. If you die in the digital world, you come back to the real world, except for Aelita, who can't get to the real world, which is the main goal of the show. So they allow the main characters to be in dangerous situations where they can realistically win or get blasted by lasers and lose, really pushing the feel of the show to be like a video game. Odd does a sick flip and shoots these crawlers with his specialty laser arrows, and I love how this one just runs off the edge. Don't even tell me the explosion knocked him to the side, he just knew his fate and accepted it. We see Odd gets random visions of the future, and noticing Aelita falls down into this pit, they don't really explain how or why Odd gets these visions because, once again, we're just jumping into the show from the middle. So a lot of this first episode review is kinda me saying, this crazy thing happens, don't worry you didn't miss anything, I'm seeing this for the first time too. We see this vision actually happen, and that's so Odd jumps down into the pit, grabbing Aelita and clawing the side of the mountain to keep from falling. And I just gotta say, Odd might be a little bit of a dork in the real world, but just understand when he comes to the digital world, he does not come to play. Back in the real world, Ulrich and Yumi's prom date is interrupted by the giant teddy bear roaming around town on a crash course towards the school, as Odd and Aelita search for the tower to deactivate, which will save the day. In Lyoko, Odd only has 50 health points left, which is apparently pretty bad, but I don't know how bad it actually is because I'm still trying to find out just how many health points they have. One more enemy stands between Aelita and the tower, and it's probably the coolest villain of the season, this giant tank ball thing, and the fact that it opens up like this just looks so sick too. They shoot these giant vertical lasers that seem like they split the world in half in front of them, and Odd jumps onto the tank, shooting it in the weak point of the Xana logo, which is also its eye. Now a big aspect of Code Lyoko is that the kids try their best to live normal lives and do normal kid stuff, but Xana always gets in the way of this, so the kids often sacrifice things they want in order to save the world and Aelita. One thing I really appreciate is how bittersweet the crew's victories are, because we see Ulrich and Yumi try to evacuate everyone out of the prom before they're crushed by the giant teddy bear, ruining the prom date they were looking forward to, and I love that Jim actually defends Ulrich and says he saw the teddy bear too, because Jim is just an absolute king throughout the show. He's kinda like Coach McGurk from Home Movies, but competent. We see Aelita enter the tower in Lyoko, which allows them to go back to the past, erasing everyone else's memories of the events that have occurred, and I'll never get over just how slow Aelita is in this world, because she could not walk slower if she tried. Like, your friends are about to die, hustle. Now that the Lyoko crew relives the same day back at the beginning, but without the Xana attack, this allows Ulrich to actually help Millie, the little journalist girl, by telling her he'll go to the school dance with her and embarrassing Sissy. I love the synergy of the main cast, like you see how close and confident they are when Ulrich tells Yumi, oh yeah, I'll go to the dance with this girl, is that cool with you? It's subtle, but I think it shows how secure and close they all are. And to simultaneously help out a fellow student while also embarrassing the snooty Sissy is always a double whammy. Sissy has a really interesting relationship with the Lyoko crew since she seems to have a crush on Ulrich, but she's the cool popular kid who's the principal's daughter, and maybe part of the joke with Sissy is that she's actually none of these things, well, except the principal's daughter. Like, if she was so cool and popular, you'd think she'd have cooler friends than these two dorks, but I think that's kind of the joke, is she's not as cool as she'd like to think she is. So this is how the first episode of Code Lyoko plays out. I respect that it jumps into the middle of the story, even though it takes a little bit to catch up with what's going on. I've read several interviews from the creators and writers of the show, and while I don't love this first episode, there's so many interesting things about it. Like how in this interview with Sophie de Crozet, head writer at Code Lyoko, she says that the middle of the show was established first, well before the beginning of the show. You don't really see this too often, but it also makes sense when you consider the show was created not with its story first, but with the concept of combining 2D and 3D elements into one show, as they wanted to capitalize on the popularity and rapid improvement improvements to technology, gaming, and the internet we saw in the late 90s. There's still a lot of fun things I want to mention about the show in interviews, but we still have a lot to go through, so let's move on to episode 2. Episode 2 has the Lyoko crew starting a band, but they have to let anyone audition. So we see this kid Mike kill it on the drums, but they reject him because they're looking for something a little more traditional. Meanwhile, this gal named Naomi Odd seems to like doesn't really play very well, but he insists she should be their drummer. Sissy and her 2 goons show up, with Nicholas, this boy who always wears these short shorts, like bro, put on some damn pants. Auditions, and is undeniably an amazing drummer. This causes a rift in the band who can't turn Nicholas down, but Odd says if they don't accept Naomi, they'll need a new guitarist. Also, Jim shows up like a king.
Lost Trouble, she's done a great job. Huh?
Would you guys need a slide trombone by any chance?
So every episode has Xana taking over some kind of technology, and it's funny because sometimes it's taking over a teddy bear or taking over a suit of armor. Don't ask me how you do that with technology. But episode 2 is arguably the biggest danger in the whole series, a nuclear explosion. What's even crazier is the kids assess the risk of this nuclear explosion, debating whether or not to warn the authorities that the entire region might just be wiped out by a nuke, but warning the authorities of this may cause them to shut down Lyoko, which wouldn't only wipe out Xana and the nuke, but Aelita too. The group is split between going to Lyoko or warning the authorities, but Aelita asks to be the tiebreaker, insisting they warn the authorities, even if that means she gets shut down. Aelita's selflessness is always so heartwarming to see, and is a big reason why she's so loved by fans, even though she's the slowest walker known to man. Yumi goes to warn the authorities about the inbound nuke, while Ulrich and Odd go to Lyoko. In the Lyoko world, they're unable to find the tower as the nuclear pylon is building up, but they realize this small oasis in the barren desert landscape is actually a surface leading to the tower. Odd dies here, and we see Ulrich showcase his specialty move, Triplicate, where he triples himself and is able to take out these giant enemy crabs. When characters get taken out of the digital world, I really like how it portrays them, like gasping for air. It really helps add weight to their danger, and also kind of makes it feel like they obviously can't just run back in after they get shot out. So Aelita makes it to the tower, and they're able to return to the past just before the nuclear explosion occurs, and before the secret of Lyoko would need to be exposed. We end the episode with a band rehearsal where we see Nicholas, along with Jim, are now both in the band, and Jeremy has this to say.
Great, you guys! Your energy is super nuclear! You're gonna make this town explode!
Too soon, Jeremy, jeez. Overall, it's a pretty cool episode with huge stakes involved with the lives of so many people on the line to save Aelita. In another interview with head writer Sophie DeCrozet, they discuss how some viewers find it disturbing how they're willing to risk so many lives to save Aelita. And they're asked if Aelita is depicted as human so that her survival appears more important, because, you know, saving a shiny Pokemon isn't worth risking so many lives to a nuke. But a human, you know, you can make an argument for at least. But Sophie says she likes the fact that there's this darker aspect to the show, and this human nature of Aelita also adds a lot of mystery to Code Lyoko, as we'll continue to uncover. So let's move on. Episode 3 starts with Odd's dog named Kiwi waking up Jim in the middle of the night. You know, at first I thought Kiwi was really disturbing, but now I think he's actually kinda cute. Jim gets up and chases Kiwi, and finds out Jeremy's spray painting the wall with a mural of Jim. We find out Jeremy's doing this so he can stay on campus for the week of vacation, and keep an eye on Xana. Sissy overhears that Jeremy's happy to stay on campus with Xana, and convinces her dad to let her stay too, and she wants to learn just who this Xana is to Jeremy. Xana causes some kind of gas leak with this purple smoke, also causing a mess throughout the dorm that Jeremy gets blamed for. Jeremy warns the others about Xana's attack, taking Ulrich out of his tutoring lesson and Odd out of his confrontation with airport security about the moving skeleton showing up on the X-ray. And arguably the most unrealistic part of this episode is not that a purple smoke caused by some evil computer program is taking over the world, but that airport security would act so casually about seeing, quote, a moving skeleton on the X-ray. Like, Odd even says it's just a skeleton. Like, why would you have a skeleton in the airport? Whose body are you hiding? So Odd and Yumi are in Lyoko fighting the enemies and protecting Aelita, while Ulrich tries to save Jim and Sissy from the smoke. We learn Yumi's special power is telekinesis, and she squashes a little monster with a boulder, which is pretty cool. Aelita enters the tower and they return to the past, which is pretty interesting because I think I might have mixed up why I thought they had to go back to the past, because there doesn't really seem to be some irreversible damage that causes them to need to go back here. Like, yeah, Sissy and Jim got got smoked out, but they'll be fine tomorrow, I think. It is funny we see Jeremy and Ulrich still spray paint the building in the new timeline, because there's no need to stay back now that Xana has been defeated, but Jeremy says he won't rest while Alita is trapped in the digital world, and Ulrich says nothing can be worse than the math tutoring he had with the old lady in this episode. I love that the spray painting changes from Jim with bunny ears to Jim with a crown, because like I've said, Jim is an absolute king. So let's move on. In episode 4, Sissy blackmails Ulrich when she finds his diary, and while finding someone's diary would be embarrassing enough, it also includes sensitive information about Lyoko, which they can't have Sissy blabbing about. Meanwhile, Xana begins to take over the new school bus that Jim brags about as his pride and joy, and Yumi stays behind to find Ulrich's diary, but only comes across Sissy's diary where she talks about how she has feelings for Ulrich. And the filter and ambiance of this scene is just overall so creepy. I don't know why they did this. I really need to take a quick moment to talk about this Albert Einstein poster on the wall. It already is uncanny enough, like this Albert Einstein alternate, but I swear, the tongue gets removed every other episode, and I have no idea why. It bothers me so much. I even tried to make note of whether the Einstein poster has the tongue out or not every episode, and this is what my life has come to. So Yumi gets Ulrich's diary back by threatening to blackmail Sissy if she doesn't reveal where she's hiding Ulrich's diary, and now that Ulrich has no obligation to hang around Sissy any further, he leaves. We see Xana's taking complete control of the bus now, as they're unable to steer or slow down the bus. Also, Odd jumps out of the bus, which is kinda hilarious in some way, and it's also pretty funny that Sissy is overall pretty unbothered by the speeding death trap bus. Like, love her or hate her, she's pretty iconic. Yumi goes into Lyoko, where she and Alita are trapped in a sandstorm with a mega tank, and Yumi ends up getting taken out by its laser blast. Odd tags in and saves Alita from falling through a ridge that almost took Alita out permanently, and we see Odd swing Alita across this huge gap just before a mega tank takes them out, which, just to remind you, if he threw her short of this gap, would cause her to die in the game and die for real. And I don't think they'd be able to rewind the real world where this bus isn't about to crash into this chemical complex. So Alita finally gets back to the tower, and we rewind back to the start of the episode where Yumi goes into the girls' bathroom to find Ulrich's diary before Sissy can blackmail him. And they share this really tender moment where Ulrich thanks Yumi and says he'll tell her about it one day. Just before he runs off, he takes a step towards Yumi, and everything about this scene is so nice to me. Even the lighting on them in this scene looks gorgeous and really adds to the intensity of this heartfelt moment. So much more than if they were just all black silhouettes here. But not all is perfect, because we end the episode on one of the weirdest, longest freeze frames I've ever seen.
Yes!
Episode 5 starts with Sissy getting into an argument with the journalist girls as they're all staring at Ulrich, with Sissy insisting she's irresistible to boys. Ulrich and Odd walk up and say Sissy's just stuck up, and she's clearly not irresistible to boys if these two dorks are the only guys she hangs out with. And part of me is like, dang, they didn't even do nothing. But then I'm also kinda like, you know, they're hanging out with Sissy, who's pretty mean. Sometimes you're gonna catch a stray. Yumi goes to check on Jeremy, who's building an alarm to automatically notify them of Xana attacks, and Yumi asks Jeremy if he thinks Ulrich likes Sissy, revealing her feelings of jealousy. Xana is messing with the train tracks, creating a crash course between these two trains, which don't have any passengers, but are carrying toxic chemicals that'll create a disaster if they collide. Ulrich and Odd set up a prank where they tell Sissy her secret admirer is looking for her, but it just turns out to be Kiwi waiting in the garden shed. Sissy says she'll see into Kiwi getting removed from the school, and this is where I draw the line. Don't mess with this poor dog. Also, I love that Odd tells Kiwi to go home, and he just casually walks back to the dorm and hops into a drawer. Like, this being Kiwi's setup is so funny to me. Also, Sissy walks in and slams the drawer shut, which I don't want to think about because this is gonna make me sad. Ulrich and Yumi go to the digital world to stop Xana, while Odd and Kiwi are stuck with Jim as they wait for a meeting with the principal regarding having a dog on campus. Ulrich tells Yumi and Alita to run off, and Ulrich uses his triplicate, which works pretty well at first, but this action was done more in sacrifice to get Alita to safety. Ulrich and Yumi end up getting devirtualized, leaving just Odd here, but he gets here late since he was dealing with the whole Kiwi situation where he escaped from school after convincing Jim to take Kiwi for a walk. Alita's able to get to the tower and reverse the train crash, thanks in part to Odd jumping in front of the mega tank laser and destroying it. And back in the real world, they changed Kiwi jumping out of the shed at Sissy to her friend in the green sweater Herb, simultaneously getting them a funny, embarrassing photograph of the two, while also protecting Kiwi from getting taken off campus or shoved in drawers drawers by Sissy. Episode 6 starts with Jeremy continuing his work on Alita's materialization, and they've gotten even closer to finalizing it. This brings up a combination of logistic issues, such as getting Alita enrolled in school and where she'll stay. Jeremy has trouble falling asleep since he can't stop thinking about Alita, and oh my gosh, the Einstein poster gets creepier and creepier. Why is it changing and why is it making this face at me? Before Jeremy can spend the night talking to his virtual GF, Xana takes over these new bulldozers on campus that are helping build the new track. The bulldozers are actually on their way to destroy the factory the supercomputer's on, which would get rid of Alita and give Xana total control of the virtual world, if not the real world as well. And this is a pretty interesting reference, because this little island their supercomputer and factory on is actually based off a real location. The Renault automobile factory, which had been closed since 1992 and demolished in 2004. So the Code Lyoko team knew they had to go in and take photos quickly, or else they wouldn't be able to get their references for where they wanted a key location of the show to take place. So yeah, I love looking at these photos of the factory in real life, and maybe it's a reference you'll only recognize if you happen to know random facts about Code Lyoko's production, which hopefully you can say now after seeing this video. Yumi and Ulrich fail to stop the bulldozers, while Odd really struggles to stop the flood by himself. Ulrich passes out and Yumi carries him back to the factory, and a friend of mine said this looks like a scene from Attack on Titan where Mikasa carries Eren away when he's passed out, and now I can't unsee the cast of Code Lyoko as the cast of Attack on Titan, just with big foreheads. Odd gets shot by a little crawly monster, and back in the real world, he warns Jeremy that he had a future vision that Yumi falls off into the digital void, which will have her virtualized forever. The stakes are really interesting here, cause you got bulldozers that could potentially destroy the scanners and trap them inside Lyoko for good, while also the threat of falling off in the Lyoko world is fatal. Which does make me question why getting shot lets you return to the real world, but falling is where they draw the line. Maybe they'll explain this at a later date. Ulrich wakes up and gets virtualized in order to save Yumi, and we see Yumi hit a mega tank to save Alita from getting shot by a laser, and again, it's so funny to see Alita move so slowly as her friend is hanging on for dear life. I know you can at least power walk Alita, I just know it. In a surprising twist, Yumi actually falls into the digital void, so even though they're able to go back to the past, Yumi isn't here with them. I was really surprised to see the reversing of time didn't actually solve everything this time. It definitely keeps me on my toes that everything can just be solved by going back, but Jeremy recalls the materialization he had solved for Alita earlier in the episode, and while it can only save one person from the digital world, Alita selflessly insists they use it to save Yumi, since she's already a part of their world. In a sense, it's pretty obvious to go back and save Yumi, but I think how effortlessly Alita comes to this conclusion is a testament to her sweet personality and still resonates with the audience. The episode ends with the Lyoko crew comforting Jeremy in his broken heart as he was close to finally getting Alita to the real world, and is overall just a nice episode, with good action, high stakes, and sweet moments between these friends. My takeaway after 6 episodes is that the overall plots aren't terribly interesting, but I love these characters and their interactions, and for me, they really carry my interest in the show, so let's move on. Episode 7 starts in a nice world, and I really love this terrain. We basically start with Alita successfully at the tower, but when they return to the scanners, Yumi's passed out. Since she's been rematerialized, Yumi has been acting really strange and standoffish, and she seems to be mad at everyone, even yelling at Ulrich to date Sissy, putting a further strain on their friendship and potential relationship. This is one of the most tense episodes of the season because of how mysterious Yumi's acting. She's already pretty serious and reserved to begin with, but they believe Yumi's acting strangely because she's traumatized from her fall in Lyoko. Meanwhile, in Lyoko, Alita's been out of the tower doing research on this mysterious orb that's being guarded, and she believes this may have something to do with Yumi's change in personality. Yumi insists on going back to the scanners, even trying to kiss Jeremy, further complicating the relationship between Ulrich and Yumi. Before Yumi can be scanned in, she opens the door to her pod, and we see her trying to rip the cords out of the supercomputer. We learn the real Yumi has been trapped inside this guardian orb, which she's freed from, and asks Ulrich to attack her so she can go back to the real world and fight her clone self. This is one of the only times we see Xana in a more human form, and the Code Lyoko staff was really firm in not making Xana a more physical or literal entity, and I think that's one of the most unique aspects of Code Lyoko as a whole. There's a weird emptiness to it all, from the barren digital landscapes to fighting against faceless technology, and I can't think of many other shows where they don't fight a villain that says, "Oh rats, foiled again, I'll have my revenge." But win or lose, we don't really see much change, and on top of that, they always return back to the past, making victory and defeat really blend together in a way I've never seen other shows pull off. And speaking of returning to the past, Aelita enters the tower and the world goes back to before Xana materialized to the real world in place of Yumi, and the episode ends with Yumi making fun of Jeremy for blushing when Xana was flirting with Jeremy to go to the scanner. But Ulrich steps in saying he's had enough of this for one day, showing that he's jealous of Yumi too, and this is probably my favorite episode up to now, because I wasn't very familiar with the characters so far, like how Yumi would act normally, let alone how the digital world and how her trauma could affect her. So I loved the mystery of whether the Yumi in the real world was actually her or not, and Xana being able to take the form of a human for once was really cool to see, especially when you consider the fact that the Code Lyoko team was pressured by producers to make Xana into a literal being for quite a long time, yet they were firm in their reasoning to keep Xana as this mysterious entity. Episode 8 starts with this famous movie director, James Finson, who I presume is some kind of parody of James Cameron, coming to the school and showing his new movie. And I don't know much about the Alien vs Predator franchise, but I've read that the monster here looks a lot like the Predalien, which I guess is a hybrid between the alien and the predator, which didn't come out until a year after this episode, Code Lyoko. So maybe it predicted the future, who knows. The movie director is here because he's filming his new movie at a nearby factory, which turns out to be the factory their secret lab is at. Ulrich tries to convince the director the factory is dangerous and isn't a good fit for the movie, but everything turns out to entice him even further, and Ulrich even gets hired as some kind of technical advisor on the movie. So Ulrich takes advantage of this role, secretly watching over to make sure they don't blow the cover of the secret lab. Ulrich goes in the secret lab, and Sissy ends up following him because they were sleeping in the same tent on set together, and whose idea was it to put them in the same tent? That's crazy. So Sissy finds out about the lab, but before they can even address this, it turns out Xana took over the xenomorph knockoff created for the new movie, which is a pretty scary concept for an episode. Odd and Aelita slide down this giant ice ramp towards the towers, and it looks really fun. And it turns out there's two towers here for whatever reason, and Aelita has to choose one, while the other is a fake. In her typical slow fashion, Aelita takes her sweet time debating which tower to choose, while the alien strangles Yumi and Ulrich. But Aelita ends up choosing the right tower, allowing them to go back to the past to save the day. Given a second chance, in order to prevent their secret lab from being exposed, Ulrich tells the film director not that the set is dangerous, but that it's already been used in a big movie before, which funnily enough gets the director to change locations. It's kinda ironic that it's not danger but originality that gets him to change locations, since his movie already involves the Predalien, which he may or may not be the original creator of now. But overall, it's a decent episode. The alien's cool, but there's not a whole lot going on here that's very interesting plot-wise, and a lot of the upcoming episodes fall into similar formulas with this episode, not really involving the plot as much as just kind of more of a formula of Xana taking over something in the real world and them having to go in Lyoko and fight it. So the next few episodes are going to be a little bit quicker in my reviews of them. Episode 9 has Xana take over a satellite, which calls everyone's phones, and it's really funny to see the whole class just take out their phones and start answering them. I guess back then, if you didn't know who was calling in the middle of class, you'd probably assume it could be some kind of emergency. Like, this was before robocallers and spam calls ran rampant. This eventually leads to the students all forming a protest to get their confiscated phones back. In Lyoko, they fight these digital hornets, and the fight is actually pretty interesting because the hornets aren't trying to de-virtualize the Lyoko crew, they're actually trying to stall them and keep them there as long as possible so they can't save Yumi, who's separated from the group. Because Yumi isn't at the factory and she doesn't have a cell phone on her, no one can warn her that Xana's taken over a military satellite with a laser beam, but they're able to go back in time just before the laser shoots Yumi. I always find the mutually assured destruction with Lyoko interesting, because we see Xana try to destroy everyone, especially Aelita, but we know Xana can't destroy the lab, because that'll also end up destroying Xana, which is why it targets Yumi, who isn't there. Not really much else to say here, but I love this POV shot of the Hornets as we see Ulrich slice them and keep running. Definitely one of the most ambitious shots of the show so far. Episode 10 has a new girl in school named Talia, who looks strikingly similar to Aelita. They debate whether or not the materialization worked, and Aelita may have lost her memory when coming to the real world. Xana's taken over a samurai suit, and we see this possessed samurai suit wreak havoc around the school. Jeremy assumes the new gal is actually Aelita, and just shows her everything about Lyoko and Xana. There's a lot of drama in whether or not Talia is actually Aelita, because if Aelita actually is out of the digital world, they can finally destroy Lyoko. And and Xana as a result. It's pretty crazy though, because they're not even sure this gal is Aelita, so Jeremy really could have just destroyed Lyoko and Aelita over this coincidence. Talia runs away and notifies the school about the lab, and this clip summarizes the episode pretty well.
While you're at it, you got any other good news?
Oh yeah, plenty.
Talia saw me punch in the access code to the lab, and the principal and the police are here now. And Xana's monsters are around.
I love that everyone's just in the room and Jeremy ignores them, like, we're gonna go back to the past anyways, this won't matter. Ulrich gets shot and Odd just goes beast mode as always, allowing Aelita to enter the tower and return to the past just before the samurai slices Yumi. And a lot of people have pointed out that Xana really has it out for Yumi, like half the episodes so far directly involve Yumi nearly dying. So it's pretty funny Talia just coincidentally looks like Aelita, along with a big list of coincidences like Talia's an orphan and that's why she doesn't have parents, just like Aelita. But Jeremy just happens to claim that he knew Talia wasn't Aelita the whole time now. Episode 11 starts with a pretty disturbing scene of these rats becoming zombies taken over by Xana. Oh my gosh. Jeremy's asked to take a special test, and if he happens to do really well and have a big brain, Jeremy will have to go to a different school for gifted kids, which poses not only the problem of Jeremy being separated from his friends, but also taking him away from the supercomputer to fight Xana. So the episode mainly revolves around the whole school trying to avoid these zombie rats, which leads to some pretty funny visuals. Yumi ends up taking over for Jeremy in the chair this episode as a result, which is pretty cool to see. There's one point in Lyoko where Odd is hanging onto a rock that gets shot, and just before he falls to his digital eternal death, the crab monster things shoot him. And like, that's such a throw, like the best shots they've ever hit, and for what? Just to let this guy be able to respawn in at a later time? They're able to return to the past before the rats bite everyone, and Jeremy says he's found a way to avoid getting sent to the gifted school, which would be by letting Odd answer the questions to the test for him. Episode 12 starts with Ulrich receiving a secret admirer's letter from Yumi, and the episode focuses a lot more on their romance and drama. Ulrich eventually works up the nerve to confront Yumi, and he tells her he feels the same way, but it turns out this letter was forged by Sissy, causing Ulrich to run off embarrassed and confused. They play this plot off so maturely, and I'm always fascinated by the tone of this show. This episode has a hornet invasion thanks to Xana, and as some comments pointed out, it's kind of funny we go from a rat invasion to a hornet invasion. Like, they just defeated these rats by running up to the roof. Let's get hornets, cause they can fly. Also, there's this crazy clip where we see Yumi get shot, and Jeremy asks if Aelita is okay.
No, Yumi! Aelita! Aelita, you okay?
Yes, I'm fine, Jeremy.
Like, way to play favorites. Ulrich doesn't really do much in Lyoko cause he's still upset, but Yumi tells him there's no reason to be upset because their friendship is stronger than this, and Ulrich motivates and ends up saving the day. I actually really like this episode because a lot of times my issues with going back to the past is that they take away the progress and stakes that were present. No pun intended. But because this episode focused much more on Ulrich and Yumi's relationship, going back to the past here actually felt like going to the future. Because Ulrich and Yumi addressed their feelings for each other, plus they united to roast Sissy for trying to pull her fake love letter stunt. So overall, one of the better episodes of the season with a great balance of stakes in and out of the digital world. In episode 13, Jeremy materializes a hair from Aelita, which shows that it's possible to materialize her, but it'll obviously be more complex to materialize the whole person. Materializing Aelita will not only give Jeremy his waifu, but they can also destroy Xana and get rid of this annoying computer virus once and for all. Meanwhile at school, weird things are happening like Yumi yells at Sissy and ends up breaking a glass in her hand, and a comment points out how funny it is that the nurse just gives Yumi some medicine and leaves, giving Yumi and Ulrich some privacy, like, where is the nurse going? Just do this yourself, kids. Basically, the episode just has Jeremy take care of Kiwi for a bit, and the school kinda turns into a natural disaster Roblox obstacle course, as we see Odd help protect the news reporter kids from the first episode as the school begins to crumble. Also, they have a part where Ulrich talks for Yumi, which is really funny.
I hope he finds the right solution before Xana attacks again.
I feel like if you zoomed in just a little more into this shot, you wouldn't even notice it's Yumi talking and not Ulrich. Aelita wants to deactivate the tower in order to save everyone, which would actually end up sacrificing Aelita here. Jeremy doesn't want to do this since he feels he's really close to finally materializing her, but deactivating the tower would sacrifice her once and for all, which Aelita insists needs to be done because the real world's currently being destroyed. Jeremy reluctantly returns to the past as we see the Lyoko group group cry with only the strand of Aelita's hair to remember her by. Yumi suggests they can make a digital copy of Aelita if they use her hair that Jeremy materialized at the beginning of the episode, and they actually managed to restore Aelita back to her digital form. Also, like many of the other episodes, it ends on a really weird cut that just ends up being creepy. Like, what is the camera turning towards? I swear I heard a heartbeat sound. That's just creepy. I'm amazed a jump scare didn't pop out. Overall, it's a pretty cool episode. I love the drama and stakes, and we see how selfless Aelita is once again with the deactivating of the towers. I read some comments that said this season was supposed to only be 13 episodes originally, so this very well could have been where the season 1 finale intended to be. And the drama and stakes make a lot of sense lining up with this. So I think that's a good intermission for this video, and I plan to cover episodes 14 through 26 next week. And I just wanted to give a quick thanks to Paul H, Page 67, and Buggy for your Patreon and Ko-fi contributions. I really appreciate it. I'd love to know what your favorite Code Lyoko episode or character is so far. It's a really tough call for me, but I feel like I like Odd just a little more than the rest. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next week, because Code Lyoko really picks up from here, and I can't wait to tell you about it. Alright, bye.